Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our read aloud of Dracula by Bram Stoker. Here we have it in this Penguin speculative fiction hardcover. No dust jacket, just original artwork on the front there, that great cover, and on the back. And then you've got the end papers at the beginning, and they change subtly at the end. Very nice, very solid, well-made hardcover. I've decided just to read this through rather than go to any other version of Dracula that I have, including my Magnum Easy Eye paperback that I love so much. Instead, we'll just do this. And we are up to chapter 19. So at this point, all of our Justice League has assembled. All of the characters who are involved here and all of their friends, strapping young Texan, an English aristocrat, a brain doctor, Abraham Van Helsing, our exposition dumper, and also Mina Harker, Jonathan Harker's new wife, who has been the spearhead of an attempt to pull together all the different narrative threads that we've had so far in this book that have not been aware of each other and they have been precisely dated by all of their authors, but those dates have not been collated. She does that. Mina puts everything together into one concerted narrative of the movements of Count Dracula and the people that are involved with him, including the lunatic Renfield. And when all that work is done, and all of our heroes have got together and had supper and bonded with each other and decided on their course of action that now that poor Lucy has been destroyed and cannot return as undead, they must seek out the source of the problem. Their task is not over. They must now seek out and destroy the Count himself, because obviously he plans on infesting all of England. Now that they've decided this, they hit Mina with a little bit of a 2x4 between the eyes. They tell her that your task is now done, but that we, the men who love you, cannot possibly effectively go into battle if you're with us, if we're worrying about you. That this isn't woman's work. So you need to sit it out. You need to sit on the sidelines from this point out while we deal with this monster, this immortal monster. I pointed out when this was first broached that Lord Godalming has a propensity for fainting when he's upset. Mina has not fainted once, but that's the way it's going to happen. So we're up to chapter 19, and we start with an extract from Jonathan Harker's journal on the 1st of October at 5 in the morning. So things are moving. No one is really complacent, because this needs to be dealt with right away. And he writes, I went with the party to the search with an easy mind, for I think I never saw Mina so absolutely strong and well. I am so glad that she consented to hold back and let us men do the work. Somehow it was a dread to me that she was in this fearful business at all, but now that her work is done, and that it is due to her energy and brains and foresight that the whole story is put together in such a way that every point tells, she may well feel that her part is finished, and that she can henceforth leave the rest to us. We were, I think, all a little upset by the scenes with Mr. Renfield. When we came away from his room, we were silent till we got back to the study. Then Mr. Morris said to Dr. Seward, Say, Jack, if that man wasn't attempting a bluff, he's about the sanest lunatic I ever saw. I'm not sure, but I believed he had some serious purpose, and if he had, it was pretty rough on him not to get a chance. Keep in mind, Renfield has seemed completely sane. They all go to see him, and he is completely sane, conversant, eloquent even, and very forcefully asked that Dr. Seward release him from the asylum. And when Dr. Seward says, no, I'm not going to do this now, we can talk about it, we can revise it, certainly this is good progress, Renfield becomes a little bit more urgent. He keeps firm control of himself, becomes a little more urgent that it is essential that he leave the asylum at any rate. You can put him in a straitjacket and take him somewhere else, but he doesn't want to be in this building. And Seward refuses. That's what Quincy Morris is talking about here. Lord Godalming and I were silent, but Dr. Van Helsing added, Friend John, you know more of lunatics than I do, and I am glad of it, for I fear that if I had been to me to decide, I would before that last hysterical outburst have given him his freedom, you mean, you foreign loon. You'd have given him his freedom, not given him free. But we live and learn, and in our present task we must take no chance, as my friend Quincy would say. All is best as they are. Dr. Seward seemed to answer them both in a dreamy kind of way. I don't know but that I agree with you. But if that man had been an ordinary lunatic, I would have taken my chance on trusting him. But he seems so mixed up with the Count in an indexy kind of way that I'm afraid I'm doing anything wrong by helping him in his fads. I can't forget how he prayed with almost equal fervor for a cat and then tried to tear my throat out with his teeth. Besides, he called the Count Lord and Master, and he may want to get out to help him in some diabolical way. That horrid thing has the wolves and rats of his own kind to help him, so I suppose he isn't above trying to use a respectable lunatic. He certainly did seem earnest, though. I only hope we may have done what is best. These things, in conjunction with the wild work we have in hand, help to unnerve a man. Uh, the that wonderful adjective indexy in an indexy kind of way is Dr. Seward referring to the fact that none of them would have put these things together if not for the narrative, the index that Mina Harker has put together. Keep in mind, Seward would not have known at all that when Renfield referred to a lord and master, he was referring to Dracula. He wouldn't have known that at all if they hadn't put together a narrative that figured out when and where Renfield did that. The professor stepped over and, laying his hand on his shoulder, said in a grave, kindly way, "Friend John, have no fear. We are trying to do our duty in a very sad and terrible case. We can only do what we deem best. What else have we to hope for except the pity of a good God? Lord Godalming has slipped away for a few minutes, but he now returned. He held up a little silver whistle as he remarked, 'That old place may be full of rats, and if so, I've got an antidote on call.' And we're going to meet the antidote, which is currently sleeping on my lap. Having passed the wall, we took our way to the house, taking care to keep in the shadows of the trees on the lawn when the moonlight shone out. When we got to the porch, the professor opened his bag and took out a lot of things which he laid on the step, sorting them into 4 little groups, evidently one for each. Then he spoke. 'My friends, we are going into terrible danger, and we need arms of many kinds. Our enemy is not merely spiritual. Remember that he has the strength of 20 men, and that, though our necks or our windpipes are the common kind, and therefore breakable or crushable, his are not amenable to mere strength.' Very interesting. This is the 3rd time that Van Helsing has said that Dracula is as strong as 20 men. So, if a full-grown, healthy man can lift, in previous eras when full-grown, healthy men were a hell of a lot more healthy than they are now, the idea was that if you're a full-grown man, you should be able to lift your own body weight. I think that would be asking a lot of a generation of vape heads. So let's say 100 pounds. That a grown man can lift 100 pounds at need, in emergency, and move it. Not just get it off the ground, but move it somewhere. 100 pounds. 20 men. That's a lot. That's a lot. That means Dracula can easily lift a ton. And we're told that he's invulnerable. That he could crush your windpipe like nothing, but you can't hurt him. A stronger man, or a body of men more strong in all than him, can at certain times hold him, but yet they cannot hurt him as we can be hurt by him. We must therefore guard ourselves from his touch. Keep this near your heart." As he spoke, he lifted a little silver crucifix and held it out to me, I being nearest to him. "Put these flowers round your neck." Here he handed me a wreath of withered garlic blossoms. "For other enemies are more mundane, this revolver and this knife, and for aid in all this, these so small electric lamps, which you can fasten to your breast, and for all and above, at the last, this, which we must not desecrate needless." This was a portion of the sacred wafer, which he put in an envelope and handed to me. Each of the others was similarly equipped. "Now," he said, "friend John, where are the skeleton keys? If so that we may open the door, we need not break house by the window, as before at Miss Lucy's." So all these men have these accoutrements now. They're all protected by garlic. They have a crucifix. They have a knife and a revolver, but they also have a little lamp, so they know where they're going. Later vampire lore, of course, there's almost no earlier vampire lore that compares with this. Later vampire lore makes much of the fact that, by asking the question, would those crucifixes or wafers or holy water or anything like that, would they be of any use against a vampire if the wearer did not believe in them? Here, I think Bram Stoker sort of takes that belief for granted, because in his day, 99.9% of the population was professing, believing Christian. Dr. Seward tried one or two skeleton keys, his mechanical dexterity as a surgeon standing him in good stead. Presently he got one to suit. After a little play back and forward, the bolt yielded and, with a rusty clang, shot back. We pressed on the door, and the rusty hinges creaked, and it slowly opened. It was startlingly like the image conveyed to me in Dr. Seward's diary of the opening of Miss Westenra's tomb. I fancy that the same idea seemed to strike the others, for with one accord they shrank back. The professor was the first to move forward, and stepped into the open doorway, and then he says in Latin, "Into your hands, O God." Shortening of "into your hands, I commend my spirit." He said, crossing himself as he passed over the threshold. We closed the door behind us, lest we should have lit our lamps we should possibly attract attention from the road. The professor carefully tried the lock, lest we might not be able to open it from within, should we be in a hurry making our exit. Then we all lit our lamps and proceeded on our search. Interesting that they're all committing crimes, right? There's the underworld story about what they're fighting, but it's a crime to linger in a graveyard, in a cemetery, in Hampstead Heath, overnight when the gates are closed. It's certainly a crime to handle children, to find a lost child and not turn it into the authorities, but just leave it on the road, hope a policeman finds it. And now they're breaking into a house. They're breaking into Carfax Abbey. The light from the tiny lamps fell on all sorts of odd forms as the rays crossed each other, or the opacity of our bodies threw great shadows. I could not for the life get away from the feeling that there was someone else amongst us. I suppose it was the recollection so powerfully brought home to me of the grim surroundings of that terrible experience in Transylvania. I think the feeling was common to us all, for I noticed that the others kept looking over their shoulders at every sound and every new shadow, just as I felt myself doing. Notice that a lot of the reactions here are not first-hand. It's a fascinating element of Dracula, is the communication of knowledge. In fact, that applies to the whole novel, which is not being told to us. It's being communicated to us in documents. No one's sitting here saying, well, gather around while I tell you the story of Dracula. Instead, we're getting these documents. And that is also true for the characters inside the documents. These people, Jonathan Harker, is being reminded of a scene that he did not see. He's being reminded of the opening of Lucy's tomb, because he's read about it. They've all read the story of Dracula. The whole place was thick with dust. The floor was seemingly inches deep, except where there were recent footsteps, in which, holding down my lamp, I could see the marks of hobnails where the dust was caked. The walls were fluffy and heavy with dust, and in the corners were masses of spiders' webs, whereon the dust had gathered till they looked like old tattered rags, as the weight had torn them partly down. On a table in the hall was a great bunch of keys, with a time-yellowed label on each. They had been used several times, for on the table were several similar rents in the blanket of dust, similar to that exposed when the professor lifted them. He turned to me and said, "You know this place, Jonathan. You have copied maps of it, and you know at least more than we do, which is the way to the chapel." I had an idea of its direction. Through my former visit, I had not been able to get admission to it. So I led the way, and after a few wrong turnings found myself opposite a low, arched, oaken door, ribbed with iron bands. So Jonathan Harker has visited the inside of Carfax Abbey. It's not that he's toured the grounds and found that it was all suitable for the Count's needs before he went to Transylvania. He's actually been inside the place. "This is the spot," said the professor, as he turned his lamp on a small map of the house copied from the file of my original correspondence regarding the purchase. With a little trouble, we found the key on the bunch and opened the door. We were prepared for some unpleasantness, for as we were opening the door, faint, malodorous air seemed to exhale through the gap. But none of us ever expected such an odor as we encountered. None of the others had met the Count at all at close quarters, and when I had seen him, he was either in a fasting stage of his existence in his rooms, or, when he was gorged with fresh blood, in a ruined building open to the air. But here the place was small and close, and the long disuse had made the air stagnant and foul. There was an earthy smell, as of some dry miasma, which came through the fouler air. But as to the odor itself, how shall I describe it? It was not alone that it was composed of all the ills of mortality with the pungent, acrid smell of blood, but it seemed as though corruption had become itself corrupt. It sickened me to think of it. Every breath exhaled by that monster seemed to have clung to the place and intensified its loathsomeness. Under ordinary circumstances, such a stench would have brought our enterprise to an end. But this was no ordinary case. And high and terrible purpose in which we were involved gave us a strength which rose above merely physical considerations. After the involuntary shrinking consequent of the first nauseous whiff, we one and all set about our work as though that loathsome place were a garden of roses. I know I've said it before, but you gotta love this prose. You just gotta love this prose. It's awesome. It's just awesome. Once you get used to it, it's awesome. We made an accurate examination of the place, and the professor, saying as we began, "The first thing is to see how many boxes are left. We must then examine every hole and corner and cranny and see if we cannot get some clue as to what has become of the rest." What has become of the rest? In other words, if the boxes of earth aren't here, is Dracula spreading them out elsewhere in England? A glance was sufficient to show how many remained, for the great earth chests were bulky, and there was no mistaking them. There were only 29 left out of 50. Once I got a fright, for seeing Lord Godalming suddenly turn and look out of the vaulted door into the passage beyond, I looked too, and for an instant my heart stood still. Somewhere, looking out from the shadow, I seemed to see the high lights of the Count's evil face, the ridge of the nose, the red eyes, the red lips, the awful pallor. It was only for a moment, for as Lord Godalming said, I thought I saw a face, but it was only the shadows. And resumed his inquiry. I turned my lamp in the direction and stepped into the passage. There was no sign of anyone. And as there were no corners, doors, apertures of any kind, but only the solid walls of the passage, there could be no hiding place even for him. I took it that fear had helped our imagination, and said nothing. At that moment, they see this. That moment has never been captured on film. All the times that this story has been filmed, no one's ever tried that. What a moment it would be. They've never tried it, though. But they're not alone. Clearly, Dracula knows they're there. A few minutes later, I saw Morris step suddenly back from a corner which he was examining. We all followed his movements with our eyes, for undoubtedly some nervousness was growing on us, and we saw a whole mass of phosphorescence which twinkled like stars. We all instinctively drew back. The whole place was becoming alive with rats. For a moment or two we stood appalled, all save Lord Godalming, who seemed seemingly prepared for such an emergency. Rushing over to the great iron-bound oaken door, which Dr. Seward had described from the outside, and which I had seen myself, he turned the key in the lock, drew the huge bolts, and swung the door open. Then, taking his little silver whistle from his pocket, he blew a low, shrill call. It was answered from behind Dr. Seward's house by the yelping of dogs, and after about a minute, 3 terriers came dashing round the corner of the house. Unconsciously, we had all moved towards the door, and as we moved, I noticed that the dust had been much disturbed. The boxes which had been taken out had been brought this way. But even in the minute that had elapsed, the number of rats had vastly increased. They seemed to swarm over the place all at once, till the lamplight, shining on their moving dark bodies and glittering baleful eyes, made the place look like a bank of earth set with fireflies. The dogs dashed on, but at the threshold suddenly stopped and snarled, and then, simultaneously lifting their noses, began to howl in a most lugubrious fashion. The rats were multiplying in thousands, and we moved out. Lord Godalming lifted one of the dogs, and carrying him in, placed him on the floor. The instant his feet touched the ground, he seemed to recover his courage, and rushed at his natural enemies. They fled before him so fast that before he had shaken the life out of a score, the other dogs, who had by now been lifted in the same manner, had but small prey ere the whole mass had vanished. So in other words, Lord Godalming, the dogs won't enter. They are forbidden by Dracula's will to enter. But once they're made to enter, once Lord Godalming actually picks them up and puts them on the ground inside, where they're surrounded by rats, these rat terriers go to work. They go to work with a vengeance. And that bit about shaking is what rat terriers do. They aren't so much, they aren't going to rip your throat out. They aren't going to waste the time. They aren't going to rip out the belly or the viscera of a rat. They break necks. And they do it at lightning speed. I have heard about this. I have read in, for instance, social accounts of 18th century England, 18th century London, also Napoleonic-era seafaring vessels. I have read stories. I had read stories about what rat terriers and basically all terriers are like with little rodents, but I had not imagined the speed of it. I simply had not. Until I saw it with my own eyes, until I had a terrier of my own, you don't imagine the speed of it. You don't imagine that as healthy and vigorous a thing as a mouse or a rat can be killed so quickly. It is literally over before you even know it's happening. And that's what's happened here, just a general slaughter of these things. With their going, it seemed as if some evil presence had departed, for the dogs frisked about and barked merrily as they made sudden darts at their prostrate foes, turned them over and over, and tossed them in the air with vicious shakes. We all seemed to find our spirits rise. Whether it was the purifying of the deadly atmosphere by the opening of the chapel door, or the relief we experienced by finding ourselves in the open, I know not, but most certainly the shadow of dread seemed to slip from us like a robe, and the occasion of our coming lost something of its grim significance, though we did not slacken a whit in our resolution. We closed the outer door and barred and locked it, and bringing the dogs with us, began to search the house. We found nothing throughout except the dust in extraordinary proportions, and all untouched save for my own footsteps when I had made my first visit. Never once did the dogs exhibit any symptom of uneasiness, and even when they returned to the chapel, they frisked about as though they had been rabbit hunting in a summer wood. The morning was quickening in the east when we emerged from the front. Dr. Van Helsing had taken the key to the hall door from the bunch and locked the door in an orthodox fashion, putting the key in his pocket when he had done. "So far," he said, "our night has been eminently successful. No harm has come to us such as I feared might be, and yet we have ascertained how many boxes are missing. More than all do I rejoice in this, our first and perhaps our most difficult and dangerous step has been accomplished without bringing thereinto our most sweet Madam Mina, or troubling her waking or sleeping thoughts with sights and sounds and smells of horror which she might never forget. Our lesson, too, we have learned, that if it be allowable to argue a particularly, that the brute beasts which are the Count's to command are yet themselves not amenable to his spiritual power. For look, these rats that would come to his call, just as from his castle top he summons wolves to your going, and to that poor mother's cry, though they come to him, they run pell-mell from so little dogs of my friend Arthur. We have other matters before us, other dangers, other fears, and that monster, he has not used his power over the brute world for the only and the last time tonight. So be it that he has gone elsewhere. Good. It has given us opportunity to cry check in some ways in this chess game which we play for the stake of human souls. And now let us go home. The dawn is close at hand, and we have reason to be content with our first night's work. It may be ordained that we have many nights and days to follow, in full of peril, but we must go on, and no danger shall we shirk from." Here I might be allowed to disagree with Dr. Van Helsing, the foreign loon. I'm not sure that this is a good first night's work. What did you accomplish? What did you accomplish? You let Dracula know that you know everything about him. You know where he lives. You know how to enter where he lives. And since he's obviously paying attention to what you're doing, you're going to lead him straight back to Madam Mina. If you think that Carfax Abbey is his home base, and if you, as you've already ascertained, he has to go back to his own Earth when the sun rises, then why not wait and kill him? Right there. As opposed to this. This gives away everything. Anyway, the house was silent as we got back, save for the poor creatures who were screaming away in one of the distant wards, and the low, moaning sound from Renfield's room. The poor wretch was doubtless torturing himself, after the manner of the insane, with needless thoughts of pain. I came tiptoe into our own room, and found Mina asleep, breathing so softly that I had to put my ear down to hear it. She looks paler than usual. I hope the meeting tonight has not upset her. I am truly thankful that she is to be left out of our future work, and even of our deliberations. It is too great a strain for a woman to bear. Okay. I did not think so at first, but now I know better. Therefore I am glad that it is settled. There may be things which would frighten her to hear, and yet to conceal them from her might be worse than to tell her, if once she suspected that there was any concealment. Henceforth our work is to be a sealed book to her, till at least such time as we can tell her that it is all finished. The earth is free from a monster of the netherworld. I dare say it will be difficult to begin to keep silence after such confidence as ours, but I must be resolute, and tomorrow I shall keep dark over tonight's doings, and shall refuse to speak of anything that has happened. I rest on the sofa so as not to disturb her. Then later on, he includes in his journal, I suppose it was natural that we should have all overslept ourselves, for the day was a busy one, and the night had no rest at all. Even Mina must have felt its exhaustion, for though I had slept till the sun was high, I was awake before her, and had to call 2 or 3 times before she woke. Indeed, she was so sound asleep that for a few seconds she did not recognize me, but looked at me with a sort of blank terror, as one looks who has been waked out of a bad dream. She complained a little of being tired, and I let her rest till later in the day. We now know of 21 boxes having been removed, and if it be that several were taken in any of these removals, we may be able to trace them all. Such will, of course, immensely simplify our labor, and the sooner the matter is attended to, the better. I shall look up Dr. Thomas Snelling today. Then we move to Dr. Seward's diary, also for the 1st of October, presumably later. It was towards noon when I was awakened by the professor walking into my room. He was more jolly and cheerful than usual, and it is quite evident that last night's work has helped to make some of the brooding weight off his mind. After going over the adventure of the night, he suddenly said, Your patient interests me much. May it be with you visit him this morning, or if you be too occupied, you foreign loon. Occupied. He's not too occupied. He's occupied. Can I go alone, if may be? It is a new experience for me to find a lunatic who talk philosophy and reason so sound. I had some work to do which pressed, so I told him that if he would go alone, I would be glad, as then I should not have to keep him waiting. So I called an attendant and gave him the necessary instructions. Before the professor left the room, I cautioned him against getting any false impression from my patient. But, he answered, I want him to talk of himself and of his delusion as to consuming live things. He said to Madame Mina, as I see in your diary of yesterday, that he had once had such a belief. Why do you smile, friend John? Interesting note here, before we get on to what Dr. Seward is smiling about. It's not just that Mina compiled a narrative of the history of and movements of Count Dracula. It's that they're all reading each other's accounts. Van Helsing has read a diary from entry from Dr. Seward's diary with the ink is still wet. Excuse me, I said, but the answer is here. I laid my hand on the typewritten matter. When our sane, learned lunatic made that very statement of how he used to consume life, his mouth was actually nauseous with the flies and spiders which he had eaten just before Mrs. Harker entered the room. Van Helsing smiled in turn. Good, he said. Your memory is true, friend John. I should have remembered. And yet it is this very obliquity of thought and memory which makes mental disease such a fascinating study. Perhaps I may gain more knowledge out of the folly of this madman than I shall of teaching the most wise. Who knows? I went on with my work, and before long was through with that in hand. It seemed that the time had been very short indeed, but there was Van Helsing back in the study. Do I interrupt? He asked politely as he stood at the door. Not at all, I answered. Come in. My work is finished, and I am free. I can go with you now, if you like. It is needless. I have seen him. Well? I fear that he does not appraise me yet much. Our interview was short. When I entered his room, he was sitting on a stool in the center with his elbows on his knees and his face with a picture of sullen discontent. I spoke to him cheerfully as I could, and with such a measure of respect as I could assume. He made no reply whatever. Don't you know me? I asked. His answer was not reassuring. I know you well enough. You are the old fool Van Helsing. I wish you would take yourself and your idiotic brain theories elsewhere. Damn all thick-headed Dutchmen. Not a word more would he say, but sat in his implacable sullenness as indifferent to me as though I had not been in the room at all. Thus departed from this time my chance of much learning from so clever a lunatic. So I shall go, if I may, and cheer myself with a few happy words with the sweet soul Madame Mina. Friend John, it does rejoice me unspeakable that she is no more to be pained, no more to be worried with our terrible things. Though we shall miss her help, it be better so. I agree with you with all my heart, I answered earnestly, for I did not want him to weaken in this matter. Mrs. Harker is better out of it. Things are quite bad enough to us, all men of the world, who have been in many tight places in our time, but it is no place for a woman. If she had remained in touch with the affair, it would infallibly have wrecked her. So Van Helsing has gone to confer with Mrs. Harker and Harker. Quincy and Art are all out following the clues as to the earth boxes. I shall finish my round of work, and we shall meet tonight. Interesting change in Renfield. Almost like he's been in communication with someone who hates Van Helsing. Then we move to Mina's journal. So we're just going from one diary to another, all on the 1st of October. It is strange to me to be kept in the dark, as I am today, after Jonathan's full confidence for so many years, to see him manifestly avoid certain matters, and those the most vital of all. This morning I slept late after the fatigue of yesterday, and though Jonathan was late too, he was the earlier. He spoke to me before he went out, never more sweetly or tenderly, but he never mentioned a word of what had happened in the visit to the Count's house. And yet he must have known how terribly anxious I was. Poor dear fellow! I suppose it must have distressed him even more than it did me. They all agreed that it was best that I should not be drawn further into this awful work, and I acquiesced. But to think that he keeps anything from me, and now I am crying like a silly fool, when I know it comes from my husband's great love, and from the good wishes of those other strong men. That has done me good. Well, some day Jonathan will tell me all, and lest it should ever be that he think for a moment that I kept anything from him, I still keep my own journal as usual. Then if he has feared of my trust, I shall show it to him, with every thought of my heart put down for his dear eyes to read. I feel strangely sad and low-spirited today. I suppose it is a reaction from the terrible excitement. Or perhaps someone is turning his attentions to you. Someone who now knows where you are. Someone who's been able to read the thoughts of the men who were in his house. Last night I went to bed with when the men had gone, simply because they told me to. I didn't feel sleepy, and I did feel full of devouring anxiety. I kept thinking over everything that had been ever since Jonathan came to see me in London, and it all seems like a horrible tragedy, with fate pressing on relentlessly to some destined end. Everything that one does seems, no matter how right it may be, to bring on the very thing which is most deplored. If I hadn't gone to Whitby, perhaps poor dear Lucy would be with us now. She hadn't taken to visiting the churchyard till I came, and if she hadn't come there in the daytime with me, she wouldn't have walked there in her sleep. And if she hadn't gone there at night and asleep, that monster couldn't have destroyed her as he did. Oh, why did I ever go to Whitby? There now, crying again. I wonder what has come over me today. I must hide it from Jonathan, for if he knew that I'd been crying twice in one morning, I who never cried on my own account, and whom he never caused to shed a tear, the dear fellow would fret his heart out. I shall put on a bold face, and if I do feel weepy, he shall never see it. I suppose it's one of the lessons that we poor women have to learn. That and the primary lesson, which I felt myself, and actually said in those words, oh, why did I ever go to Whitby? I can't quite remember how I fell asleep last night. I remember hearing the sudden barking of the dogs and a lot of queer sounds like praying on the very tumultuous scale from Mr. Renfield's room, which is somewhere under this. And then there was silence over everything, silence so profound that it startled me, and I got up and looked out the window. All was dark and silent. The black shadows thrown by the moonlight seemed full of a silent mystery of their own. Not a thing seemed to be stirring, but all to be grim and fixed as death or fate, so that a thin streak of white mist that crept with almost imperceptible slowness across the grass towards the house seemed to have a sentience and a vitality of its own. I think that the digression of my thoughts must have done me good, for when I got back to bed I found a lethargy creeping over me. I lay a while, but could not quite sleep, so I got out and looked out the window again. The mist was spreading, and was now up close to the house, so that I could see it lying thick against the wall, as though it was stealing up to the windows. The poor man was more loud than ever, that's Renfield, and though I could not distinguish a word he said, I could in some way recognize his tones, some passionate entreaty on his part. Renfield is louder and louder. He is yelling. He is pleading with someone. He is pleading with someone. Then there was the sound of a struggle, and I knew that the attendants were dealing with him. I was so frightened that I crept into bed and pulled the clothes over my head, putting my fingers in my ears. I was not a bit sleepy, at least so I thought. But I must have fallen asleep, for, except dreams, I do not remember anything until the morning when Jonathan woke me. I think that it took me an effort and a little time to realize where I was, and that it was Jonathan who was bending over me. My dream was very peculiar, and was almost typical of the way that waking thoughts have become merged or continued in dreams. A little bit of heavy-handed stage work here on Bram Stoker's part. Mina and Van Helsing and Jonathan Harker. She has compiled this record. She knows it better than anybody. She knows from all of those different sources that Dracula can assume the form of mist. And she's right next to his house. Anyway, I thought that I was asleep and waiting for Jonathan to come back. I was very anxious about him and was powerless to act. My feet, my hands, and my brain were weighted so that nothing could proceed at the usual pace. And so I slept uneasily and thought. Then it began to dawn on me that the air was heavy and dank and cold. I put back the clothes from my face and found to my surprise that all was dim around me. The gaslight, which I had left lit for Jonathan, but turned down, came only like a tiny red spark through the fog, which had evidently grown thicker and poured into the room. Then it occurred to me that I had shut the window before I had come to bed. I would have got out to make certain of the point, but some leaden lethargy seemed to chain my limbs and even my will. I lay still and endured, that was all. I closed my eyes, but could still see through my eyelids. It is a wonderful trick that our dreams play on us, and how conveniently we can imagine. The mist grew thicker and thicker, and I could see now that it had come in, for I could see it like smoke, or with white energy of boiling water, pouring in, not through the window, but through the joinings of the door. It got thicker and thicker, till it seemed as if it became concentrated into a sort of pillar of cloud in the room, through the top of which I could see the light of gas shining like a red eye. Things began to whirl through my brain, just as the cloudy column was now whirling in the room, and through it all came the scriptural word, a pillar of cloud by day and a fire by night. Was it indeed such a spiritual guidance that was coming to help me in my sleep? But the pillar was composed of both by day and night guiding, for the fire was in the red eye, which at the thought got a new fascination from me, till, as I looked, the fire divided and seemed to shine on me through the fog like two red eyes, such as Lucy told me of in her momentary mental wanderings when, on the cliff, the dying sunlight struck the windows of St. Mary's Church. Suddenly the horror burst upon me that it was thus that Jonathan had seen those awful women growing into reality through the whirling mist in the moonlight, and in my dream I must have fainted, for all became black darkness. The last conscious effort which imagination made was to show me a livid white face bending over me out of the mist. I must be careful of such dreams, for they would unseat one's reason if they were too much of them. I would get Dr. Van Helsing or Dr. Seward to prescribe something for me which would make me sleep, only that I fear to alarm them. Such a dream at the present time would become woven into their fears for me. Tonight I shall strive hard to sleep naturally. If I do not, I shall tomorrow night get one of them to give me a dose of chloral. That cannot hurt me for once, and it will give me a good night's sleep. Last night tired me more than if I had not slept at all. Then the 2nd of October at 10 at night. So, where are our intrepid team members now? Are they not reading this diary? Is she keeping this from them when she knows perfectly well the danger of keeping records from each other? Last night I slept, but did not dream. I must have slept soundly, for I was not awaked by Jonathan coming to bed, but the sleep had not refreshed me, for today I feel terribly weak and spiritless. I spent all day yesterday trying to read or lying down dozing. In the afternoon Mr. Renfield asked if he might see me. Poor man, he was very gentle, and when I came away he kissed my hand and bade God bless me. Some way it affected me much. I am crying when I think of him. This is a new weakness, of which I must be careful. Jonathan would be miserable if he knew that I had been crying. He and the others were out until dinner time, and they had all came in tired. I did what I could to brighten them up, and I suppose that the effort did me good, for I forgot how tired I was. After dinner they sent me to bed, but I knew that they wanted to tell each other of what had occurred during the day. I could see from Jonathan's manner that he had something important to communicate. I was not so sleepy as I should have been, so before I went I asked Dr. Seward to give me a little opiate of some kind, as I had not slept well the night before. He very kindly made me up a sleeping draught, which he gave me, telling me that it would do me no harm, as it was very mild. I have taken it, and am waiting for sleep, which seems to keep aloof. I hope I have not done wrong, for as sleep begins to flirt with me, a new fear comes. What if I may have been foolish in thus depriving myself of the power of waking? I might want it. Here comes sleep. Good night. That's the end of the chapter, where the men are out fighting Dracula while he's making house calls. So there we go. We are in the thick of battle now, and we will move on to the next chapter next time. Thank you, BookTube.